So, good afternoon and welcome back. I hope you are all well refreshed over the coffee break. This morning we mentioned that times are changing. ERTMS has to change as well. The general outline and the objectives behind the TSI 2022 package were explained by the European Commission, and now we, as European Union Agency for Railways, will give you more insight into what will be in this package. You might well be aware that we are currently in the public consultation phase. The draft recommendation for the TSI has been published on the 18th of March. It's available through our website. The consultation will be closed mid-June so that we can then in turn prepare the final recommendation. Without further ado, I would like to call my colleagues from the agency to the panel. Please join me on stage, and we will then give you the insights. First of all, what is the impact of the modifications, and also referring back to workshop 6 yesterday. So, colleagues, and of course, this time we have not followed the example of the Commission. We have borrowed from CR a female colleague, so that we are not a full male panel. Good. May I ask the first two presenters, Wouter Malveit and Juan Hernandez, to the stage. Wouter, Juan, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. So we had yesterday a workshop, and also in this presentation we will try to explain you the main modifications that are part of the CCS TSI 2022 revision. So the main topics that we discussed yesterday, we divided the presentation in two parts. We have a topic 1 where we explain a little bit what is now really within, if you know the CCS TSI, the Appendix A, all the subsets, what are the real main change requests linked to the innovations that we included. And then a second part, topic 2, that my colleague Juan will present. If we have this new functionality and some maintenance in the specification, what is then the new requirements that we will put in Chapter 7 of the TSI, and the transition and migration requirements, mainly to balance the different interests of, for example, infrastructure managers and railway undertakings. And today, in topic 3, we will debrief you a little bit of the main input we received during this workshop. So, first of all, what are now the main changes in the ERTMS specifications? You heard it already several times today. You will see that we included in the CCS TSI a third part under the umbrella of ERTMS being ATO. So we have ETCS already, we have already GSMR, so the radio system, and now we add ATO up to grade of automation 2. We are right on time. Yesterday we learned that even ATO Stuttgart, who implements already ATO GOE2, they are already fully compliant to what are our draft specifications, which are finalized in our EECT, where we handle all the change requests. A second big part is we prepare the CCS TSI for the future radio system based on 5G. My colleague Gil will give you more details. And from the ETCS perspective and from the ATO perspective, we want to be fully ready that this ETCS can be connected to this new radio system. So we call this ETCS over FRMCS readiness. So also within the CCS-TSI in Appendix A, you will find the necessary technical specification to make ETCS ready for FRMCS. The part on FRMCS itself, the full specifications, will come later, but the implementation framework, when they are fully specified and will be published, the TSI is already ready for this later phase when FRMCS will be specified with all transition and migration schemes. A third part, which maybe you didn't hear so much in the previous presentations, also within the EECT of ETCS, so the system authority, we processed some important change requests related to digital rail. Maybe you know it, we have already level 3 as part of the specifications, but in the last years, mainly the ERTMS users group developed a very realistic and implementable system, what is called hybrid level 3. So it's a hybrid train detection where partially you use train detection on long blocks, but you also make virtual subsectioning. And this gives already more than 80% of the benefits of a full level 3, because you can also reduce on this large section, not to install anymore in future any train detection system. And the beauty of the concept is that it doesn't require many changes to the operational concept, and it provides the possibility to have operational rules in case of degraded modes. I heard this morning that also degraded modes we should take care of. So here there is what we had in our ERTMS Game Changer stakeholder platform, also the input from the users, that this is the concept that they see in the midterm to be implemented. I know in Paris-Lyon it will be implemented in the upcoming years, and it provides high benefits. We heard also today something about digital automatic couplings. I heard that the financing for Germany is fully foreseen. It's not part of the CCS-TSI itself, digital automatic coupling, but we prepared also ETCS over what I call DAC readiness. So also an important change is what we call the change request cap anywhere supervision and always connected, always located. That will make it possible that we get rid of all these shunting signals. And in addition, it will improve the performance and increase the safety of this operational concept. So here I really want to thank the EECT work that has been done, because it was a tremendous work that get not yet sufficient attention, but it will support further the digital rail. And in particular, I also want to thank my two colleagues, Alain Gougardi, Olivier Gimin, who work extremely hard on this concept. We heard a lot of onboard modularity. If we introduce ATO or FRMCS, we clearly decouple it from the ETCS safety part, that we have different life cycles. So we have already an important first step on the onboard modularity, and it will be based, as Wafka said, on an Ethernet-based platform. Now, what is also important is to say that these are the big elements that justify a new ETCS system version, these changes to ATO, FRMCS, so we must, and DAC, we must make ETCS ready for these changes. But it's also important that we have also a high workload on other small optimizations that we include. Small, for those that submit them, they are never small. There is always a high pressure to analyze them and to reflect on the need. So sometimes we reject them because we hear that we don't want to increase further the complexity. But some, we accept them and we see an added value in the longer term. Some examples are that, for example, Denmark, they submitted a change request to further improve the braking conversion model. Thanks to the industry and UNICIG, this solution is completed, so it will provide more ergonomy to the real end users, the train drivers. And this is now being tested still in the Netherlands, that this solution can be part of the CCS-TSI 2022 package. I heard cybersecurity. We will implement 2 change requests to handle some limited cybersecurity risks that were identified. And we also have some further change requests that will decrease the costs for the number of balises to be installed. For example, in Spain, the industry analyzed a change request to relax the balise mounting requirements, that on 3 rail tracks we don't have to duplicate the number of balises. So all in all, this ERTMS specifications, this new functionality will support the digital rail, and ETCS specifications are ready for that. And the flagship ATO, we have to thank Shift Rail and in particular Benoît Bienfait, who presented each month to ERA the evolutions and handled all the comments from the different directions. And I remember, Josef, I had to replace you once in the UK, where they said, when we announced this ATO to be part of the CCS-TSI, they said, the leasing companies, we are very happy with this initiative, because we already have 25 different Class B ATO systems in the UK. So I think we are here right on time, and I think it's important that ATO and ETCS will be fully harmonized. So a little bit a more difficult slide. So in this CCS-TSI, for the first time, we will introduce at once 2 new system versions. One for the compatible part for ATO, what we have today, the latest one is 2.1. We will add 2.2 for ATO, and with the additional enhancements that are also compatible enhancements. We will also introduce a version 3.0 for the incompatible enhancements. This means that a 3.0 can always run an onboard, which will have 3.0, will always be capable to run on previous versions, but some functionalities will require that all vehicles shall be implemented with this 3.0. And the main examples are, of course, if you go to FRMCS, we heard that GSMR will get obsolete between 2030, 2040. At that time, you will need to have ETCS system version 3.0 capable to handle the FRMCS connection. Or if we speak about getting rid of shunting signals and you want that train to enter on this supervised maneuver mode, then you also need this 3.0. We added some additional, let's say, not agreed national technical rules as part of this 3.0. And Juan will explain, because this is the most challenging to balance, if we say that there is an impact on existing vehicles, on how we will balance the requests from RUs to be as stable as possible versus the request from IMs to implement this as quickly as possible, because they do, for example, not want to maintain 2 radio systems. Another big change in the CCS-TSI 2022 is that during the process, we also handle change requests where there are potential different interpretations of the specifications, and we focus there on what we call errors that could prevent normal service. We have more or less, in the period of 7 years, 80 change requests. This means that these do not all happen in reality. These are mainly problems that are reported that could lead to different interpretations. And as you may know, in the last period, we published already 2 technical opinions, because everybody requested, do not propagate potential ambiguities or different interpretations in new projects. So we published quickly 2 technical opinions with a service pack, let's say it's a maintenance pack. And if there is a problem that is really happening in one of the projects, we provide to you already or mitigation measures or the final error correction solutions that will be implemented in the next release. Although we published these technical opinions, we still see in our vehicle authorizations that these are not implemented in all products. So here Juan will also speak why we need that there is a maintenance of the software by the projects in order to have a manageable system. These errors will be implemented in the CCS-TSI in one single set of specifications. So we will not have any more 3 different tables, but we will have one single set where all errors are implemented so that it cannot be misused, that the TSI still have an old baseline with some errors and say, I comply into the TSI, so I don't have to implement this known error corrections. So these will be, error corrections will be applicable to all of the system versions if the function is impacted. And we will still allow that, what we call partial fulfillment, but on 4 clean, well-defined configurations, meaning what we have today, system version 2.0, 2.1, 2.2, or 3.0. And these are the choices that an applicant has to implement, but no cherry picking, I do this change request, but not this one. So it will be a very clean configuration in order to have a well-defined framework. I will now hand over to Juan.
Thank you much, Guter. Good afternoon, everybody. So I will explain how these new changes and new things are introduced in the TSI, how this shall be implemented in the projects, what we call the transition and migration regime. So starting for the new functionalities, this is need to balance the different interests that has been already expressed this morning. So first thing is member states shall update the national implementation plan by December 2023, providing a coordinated approach between IMs and RUs. And then when an IM wants to benefit from the investments they made in new functionalities, this should be announced and give enough time to the RUs to implement. So this will be under 2 conditions. It must be 7 years from the publication of the functionality in the TSI, and then 5 years from the announcement of the IM of their intention of using this functionality. This mandatory requirement will be applicable then to new vehicles. I mean, so the existing vehicles are not impacted, but new vehicles being authorized in that area of use after these conditions are fulfilled must implement this new functionality so the overall system benefits. Regarding the maintenance, as we heard this morning, the objective is to have an overall European network interoperability. So it's needed that products are compliant to the specs. So we are removing this option not to implement it fully, but we also want to acknowledge that in some cases, some errors may need. So in that cases, a change request need to be raised and the proper treatment will be held to that possible issue. And the introduction of error corrections, the information, as Wood explained, is available since the agency opinions how to solve these issues. But we want to reinforce the need to really implement them to avoid that every time a vehicle is extending the area of use, a new compatibility check needs to be arranged, or to check in what are the specific compatibilities. We need a network-wide compatibility. In that sense, the transition introduced for those errors, for these corrections and the maintenance of the spec is what we call the fast regime, opposite to the standard regime of 7 years for innovations, is made of 2 years. In these 2 years, basically is split 1 year for the products or the IC to be updated, and then a 2nd year for the deployment on the fleet. But what is relevant to highlight is this is not automatic for the whole fleet, because this is unaffordable, but only for those identified cases where these specific problems occur. So it's in principle should be limited if the projects, the vehicles are in operation without any problem. In theory, they should not be impacted, so it's not a general renewal of the fleet every 2 years, but only where really needed and the impact is really assessed and considerable and acceptable. And just to conclude, I will just make a summary of what was discussed yesterday in workshop 6. as other workshops, we ran it 3 times. And we want to highlight 2 main issues, well, not 2, a couple. The cooperation between the agency and the Commission in all the process of drafting the TSI, that we ensure that we are fully aligned with the Green Deal objective for the TSI revision package. Regarding the new functionalities and how they are introduced, it was highlighted the need that a coordinated approach between all the elements, and this role is to the member state. The CCS TSI includes certain elements, but for sure there are not all the tools inside the TSI to provide funding or to provide economic compensation schemes, for example, to incentivize the use of ITO. This is out of the scope of the TSI, and we introduced this notification by the IM, but okay, still something else is missing. Regarding the maintenance, it was agreed by all parties that these measures are needed, that they are going in the right direction. We have already heard that, but it's true that probably in the first stage this may have an impact of a possible slowdown in the deployment, but in the medium term they are needed to reach the objective of having a network-wide deployment and benefiting, as the Commission expressed, from the industrial deployments and economic of scales. So thank you much all, and okay, I give back the floor to Joseph.
Many thanks, Wouter and Juan. And also many thanks for perfectly keeping the time to the second. You cannot see it, but it was very, very well timed. Now, it is my pleasure to call to the lectern Hélène Afaoui-Kenak from SNCF, but today she is speaking on behalf of CR, and she will tell us how to manage upwards compatibility in the TSIs. Hélène, vous avez la parole.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm very glad not only to be the female minority of this desk, but also to have the pleasure to represent CER, that represents more than 70 infrastructure manager, railway undertaking, and partners. And also I have to say that we get a lot of support from UNIFE during making up this presentation, so that we present our views on the CCS TSI. And I will thank them again from UNIFE and UNISIG for their support and the feedback. And we will say at the end that we convey a message that is from both of us. Oh, this is the click?
Yes.
Okay. So my presentation today will be about managing baseline compatibility, an important subject that we would like probably to take on board for TSI revision, maybe 2022 for some points, but further revision to, if possible. So let's start by, I think Wouter and Juan already expressed them well. There have been some great achievements in the CCS TSI revision. We can say that the maturity of the core ETCS specification is something that we do have now, that we are proud of, and we do hope that actually error correction will be manageable and controlled for the future. We have ATO DOA2, and this provide automatic and assisted driving with better optimized energy consumption and better adherence to the timetable. We have the full level 3 principle to further reduce the interval between training to increase the capacity. The FRMCS principle, even if today we have FRMCS provision, and those are good specification to start the test with FRMCS, is something that is a great achievement. Train modularity is something that you have heard from me maybe 3 years ago in 2019 with a presentation of what we were doing in OCORA. It has been something that is essential and has been taken on board by ERA, and we hope that will be further continue in the system pillar. And there yet we can get flexibility, simpler integration of new technology and shorter development cycle. The transition framework has been explained. It's a great achievement because if it can give us sufficient time to integrate the evolution of the TSI into existing project and assets. And to finalize, there is this coordinated national implementation plan that is now described in a way where it is elaborated by the member state, but with the agreement of both IM and RUs. So those are great achievements, but let's not forget that we are still working and there are daily work still ongoing because the TSI will be really finalized by October, November, and there are still important subjects going on. Well, to go to the point of baseline compatibility, in general terms, what we need is baseline compatibility for migration and integration in the rollout plan. The rail sector needs predictability and transparency of the applicable requirement in order to successfully design, develop, and deliver vehicle trackside products to the market, but using the standard long-term contracts applicable in the railway sector. We need to minimize the industrial risk and to guarantee the investment of all stakeholders for the project already signed. So the TSI already ensures backward compatibility to smoothly integrate new onboard assets into the existing railway system without interrupting the ongoing operation. And this is a great achievement. But now that we still need is to jointly elaborate the principle of a stable baseline roadmap, because we need stable development framework to continue rollout program with a period of stability of the specification on which we can rely on, because our deployment needs to be consistent. We want to avoid to have a patchwork of system version or ERTMS baseline on tracks and on board. And because future evolution needs to be either harmless to the ERTMS core specification or predictable in a way that we can have an anticipated view on when they will be introduced. And because we need to restore a control and manageable maintenance of evolution of the specification so that we have the capacity to introduce them into existing assets and future projects. So a stable baseline roadmap makes it possible to gain control over the ERTMS rollout, and that's what we want. So let's collectively consider the capacity of the railway sector for implementing the changes. We have to take into account the supply of product and services, the necessary process for new authorization plus conformity to type that can be time-consuming, the existing vehicle reserve and workshop capacity, the service interruption for trackside work, and the training of personnel. Compelling the sector to continuously pay to adapt its product and existing fleet and tracks will prevent it to benefit from the return of experience. And it may even prevent it from investing in evolution with a high added value. So let's be aware of the transition risk that we all face. There are the economic impact, there is this interruption of vehicle production, there is this impact on existing vehicle and trackside in operation. We need to assess the level of risk associated before introducing a new requirement within the mandatory implementation. And there is a tool for that. It's called a full impact assessment. Because we need to recall that the single European railway area is not for free, and moving from legacy system to a European target system is technically, organizationally, and financially challenging. And in particular, I would quote this specific transition regime that will lead to interrupt vehicle type production and to impact existing vehicle and tracks in operation are to be limited to the minimum. So the importance of this full impact assessment is important to demonstrate a favorable cost-benefit ratio for the rail sector, considering the impact on all sector stakeholders and end users for new and existing project and asset. Important additional elements are the availability of the European and national funding compensation mechanism, the technology readiness level of the proposed change, and the supply and integration capacity of the sector. All those aspects need to be considered, and indeed, it is the impact assessment of the ERTMS implementation on the ERTMS implementation plan that we need to well consider. So that's why the rail sector asked the European police that where the European policy see a need for a faster implementation, support and resources shall be given to achieve this. The legal framework TEN-T, CEF, SERA, the interoperability and safety, needs to be better linked to pave the way for sound and funding mechanism supporting the innovation and major technical change for the rail sector when specified in the TSI. So we therefore ask the European Commission and the agency to investigate how changes in the technical framework with specific transition can be legally supported by funding and compensation mechanism to ensure a balanced distribution of cost and benefit and provide sufficient guarantee for the investors. So here is a view of an inner party CER who has been following the whole CCS-TSI revision process, and we made several recommendations in the frame of position. First, on migration and transition, regarding the specific retroactive regime that was used to be called C3, we can apply it, but only in duly justified cases when a full impact assessment with funding, compensation mechanism considering the supply and integration capacity. Train modularity, but still recall it's essential and still to be continued because we are not fully there yet, and there are work to be continued after 2022. A new baseline, but I shouldn't say this word, I should say a new system version X, I guess, only when substantial added value is given. And this needs to be a sectoral agreement between all economic actors and improvement on the error correction process. On that, I think there's still things that we can do and we still have to do to try to do, because only the error impacting normal services should be corrected. The time frame is not achievable, and we need to have more flexible or achievable deadline regarding that. We need to ease the authorization process regarding error correction to avoid a new authorization be triggered. And eventually, we need to update the DMT ERTMS impact assessment report because it could not take into account in its analysis the case of error correction. So we do see that on the economic impact, there is still room for IM and IU agreement on mitigation measure, and we invite to have only in cases of disagreement the TSI solution be implemented, since a decision shall be made. So, well, those are our main conclusions. Baseline compatibility is the point that we could not address in the frame of the TSI 2022 revision. Baseline stability is the tool for that. A full impact assessment is a mean to provide this baseline stability, and, well, recall it, upgradability or even updatability by design in future harmonized on-board solution is paramount and still to be achieved. So program managers, sometimes IMs, most of the time member state, they need to restore the control over the system rollout, and not only the system technology, but both, I mean, UNISFE, CER at least, are fully committed to provide their expertise and support ERA in the construction of a manageable and stable baseline roadmap for the deployment of ERTMS. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hélène, for this very clear message. We already heard a lot about game changers as part of the new TSI 2022. One of the most important game changers clearly is the new radio system, FRMCS, and Giel Spaans will now give us the basics, the strategies and perspectives behind FRMCS, and this is also the feedback from Workshop 7. Giel, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Joseph, very much. When I prepared the presentation for this conference, I could not leave it to think also about the past. I think it was 2016, 2017, we announced in this conference that we are going to work on FRMCS in a certain way. In the previous conference in 2019, it was announced that yes, we have made some steps, and yes, we are preparing the introduction of FRMCS and so on and so on. And today I'm happy to see, and I'm happy that I can present that indeed we have made some steps, and indeed the TSI 2022 will contain some, not the complete set, of specifications for FRMCS. So in this presentation I would like to give you just a bit of information about the steps from GSMR towards FRMCS, what is FRMCS, and what are the conditions for the further deployment of FRMCS. And in the meantime, I will give you some feedback on the workshops yesterday, which were well attended. So first, we are in the current situation that we have GSMR in operation. And when we look forward, well, GSMR has started somewhere in 2020, 2000, and it will, according to the industry and according to a lot of railways, RUs and IMs, survive until 2030, 32, 35. That's amazing long foreign telecom system, you can imagine. And it is still working, and it is still helping the railways. Also, the introduction of ETCS is not hindered or obstructed by a relatively old system like GSMR. So when we asked yesterday in the workshops, what are the main drivers for you to migrate from GSMR to FRMCS? In fact, the answer was, well, there are no drivers at all, except we would like to have slightly more capacity, for instance, to carry ATO, or on dense areas, ETCS. But the main topic is, well, we have to face indeed the obsolescence of the GSMR system and the GSMR technology. And then, of course, we will at a certain moment have FRMCS in operation. And the main question today is, how do we migrate from GSMR to FRMCS? Well, first I would like to indicate that what has been achieved until now. You see here the beautiful yellow arrow, FRMCS specifications version 1. Version 1 sounds promising, and that will be displayed and published in the TSI 2022. But of course there will also be an FRMCS version 2. What is exactly the difference? Well, quite simple, we don't have yet the full set of specifications of the FRMCS system. So we have to make a first step, and the first step is important for the deployment of ETCS and ATO. So what we would like to prevent is that the introduction and the migration towards FRMCS is gives a lot of burden to the deployment of ETCS and ATO in the coming years. So it is important that this system specifications version 1 contain those requirements which are relevant for the applications to be migrated. I will go in detail later on. The specifications version 2 are expected to be the complete set of specifications for FRMCS, onboard and trackside. And based upon these full set of specifications, tendering can start for, of course, FRMCS, trackside and onboard. There's one thing still missing, and that is that we need to test and validate the specifications we have got until now. And there I got also from the workshop the feedback that here we have a gap. Quite simply, for some reasons, and I don't know where it went wrong, it seems that there is no budget allocated for these prototype, pilot, a European pilot and so on, for the test and validation activities. So I think that there will be a meeting necessary with the Commission to find out how can we support this activity, because this activity is extremely important. You do not get, based upon specifications, all of a sudden working products. And of course the next step is then migration. It is a beautiful green circle. It's not a black hole. The future is bright, so I'm always optimistic. However, we need some implementation and migration rules. Wouter and Juan have already indicated the 7 years and 5 years mechanism and so on. It will need also some more details about this, But this is also the principle for FRMCS. But then the question is, what is FRMCS? We are talking about FRMCS. The Commission has mentioned FRMCS this morning. All presentations are about FRMCS, at least they contain the term FRMCS. But what is it? Well, in fact, quite simple, without being too technical, FRMCS is in fact a radio communication system which provides communication services for voice, data, video, with some specific railway or, let's say, critical communication features which are developed on a global scale. So it's not a European invention, it's a global specification made by 3GPP. And we are talking about the service layer, so the services which are brought to the applications, and the transport layer. And transport means radio technology. And in this case, we have followed the latest developments in radio technology, so that's the term may be very familiar for you, 5G based. And we are happy that for those who would like to have dedicated railway networks, we have also got additional radio spectrum, because without radio spectrum, you cannot build a network. Yeah, you can build a network, but you cannot switch it on. Of course, there is a beautiful split between onboard and trackside from the beginning. So that means that the full set of specifications for onboard is more or less coming for this communication system. And for the trackside, of course, trackside is in let's say, the TSI perspective, it's a kind of black box. But a black box is not black. There are a lot of specifications which are related to the trackside implementation and the trackside equipment, of course. But the FRM system is not working on its own. What is essential is that it serves applications. The green ones are familiar for you, ATO and ETCS. And the a bit orange ones are the ones who are currently provided by GSMR, so voice applications and railway emergency call things, and so on. And what is mentioned already earlier this morning is about the modularity, and it means that also this FRMCS system concept, I would say, provides this modularity. You see the two blue vertical lines. In fact, that describes the standardized and fully harmonized and well-specified interface from FRMCS communication system to all applications, also to future applications, and even in the case that in the future 5G will be replaced by 6G or satellite will be flying in and so on, the interface to the application will be kept. So this is really a beautiful split between applications and the FRMCS system. In the TSI, which has already been mentioned earlier by my colleagues, the objective is that we, in 2022, we have already the legal anchor for the development of prototypes, trials, preparation of tenders, and so on. So that means that the body text contains the basic requirements. As for GSMR, we also have for FRMCS a kind of copy-paste, you could say, referencing to NXA documents. And of course, the identification of the high-level architecture building blocks, the so-called interoperability constituents, are defined, and the rules for the introduction, which you are well aware of in the meantime. And the NXA contains, in fact, aside of GSMR, so totally separated, also a set of specifications for FRMCS. And that's not only the functions and the services FRMCS will offer, but also, and in particular, the interfaces to the applications, what I said before. And of course, the air gap is extremely important. Just a few words on the preparation of ETCS and ATO specifications. FRMCS is one side, the applications are the other side, and one of the aims of this TSI version is that the full set of specifications of the interfacing between FRMCS and ATO will be, and ETCS will be published, in order to have the possibility to start development of products, ETCS and ATO products, which in the future, when FRMCS will be deployed and installed in onboard and trackside, can be done without changing these applications. So that's the main aim. And of course, because we don't have the full set of specifications, we expect that the subsequent updates of the specifications and the extensions of the FRMCS specifications will be published by either a next TSI, for instance in 2025, although that's not confirmed yet, or by ERA technical opinions. as usual. The migration rules have been already mentioned earlier, so I can go very fast through it. Decommissioning of GSMR is not defined yet. There is no target, no deadline for GSMR. Maybe it will come after 10 years, I don't know, but currently we don't have a deadline. And the rules for the 7 and 5 years have already been mentioned. And when can I start introducing FRMCS? Well, in principle, at any time when you want. However, you have, once you introduce this, you have to apply the requirements and you have to comply to the requirements which are specified and published in the TSI. Member states, and that's mentioned earlier, it is important that we have the implementation plans for FRMCS so that everyone can be prepared. And here also feedback from the workshops is that, well, maybe we have to think about the integration of the deployment and rollout of FRMCS in the European deployment plan. So we will have definitely a talk with Mr. Rutte about the ideas and to brainstorm about could this be helpful or not. So let's see how that happens. Then the migration steps, very easy. It is still in the green box, not defined. One of the first steps which could be done is the preparation of the ETCS on board, and then in random order to do the trackside rollouts, onboard system installation of FRMCS, and onboard voice applications addition. But this is a matter currently of investigation. We don't have clear plans, and we have also seen that many member states and IAMs and IUs don't have concrete plans. So in the next conference, I hope that this will be explained to all of you and that we have a beautiful deployment plan for FRMCS also. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Giel. Many thanks for your clear explanation on the future of radio. We heard this morning in the presentation by Wafka the reflection about evolution and revolution. We also heard that, of course, in a system like ERTMS, we have to build upon what exists. And somebody even used the metaphor of standing on the shoulders of giants. Now, I mentioned in my introduction this morning that since 16th of June 2019, the agency is authorizing entity. So far, we have authorized more than 30,000, more precisely 35,000 vehicles. But with ERTMS theory, I guess we have around 1,500 because we have 1,200 locomotives and some EMUs. So let's say around 1,500 vehicles with ERTMS. So we have quite some experience. And now I ask Thierry Brenn and Christian Cléchat to give us the return of experience, but also feedback from workshop 2 yesterday about ERTMS retrofitting and installation. Thierry and Christian, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Joseph, and good afternoon, everybody. To start, some figures on what has been achieved since June 19 until March 2020. We have, in total, for the pre-engagement, we have issued 62 pre-engagement opinions. The majority of them were for wagons, and for locos, sorry, and 8 for the wagons. These proportions reflect also the interest of the sector to have the opinion early in the process from the authorizing entity and the concerned NSA on what will be the rules to apply and what could be the strategy to apply. In terms of type authorization case, we have issued 173 authorization. It's more or less a perfect split between wagon and loco, train set, and special vehicles. Concerning the authorization case, the majority of one was first. We have issued 73 first. That's mainly for a wagon. We have, for the locos and the train set, issued 65 extension of area of use. And we had also to deal with 34 new authorization, this change made to an already authorized type. We have in total issued 2,600 conformity to type. If we look to the ETCS implementation, we see that 75% of the locos and the transit are equipped with ETCS, for also a balance between baseline 2 and baseline 3, 45 with baseline 2 and 55 with a baseline 3. Thus we see that more and more vehicles are equipped with ETCS, but also that the shift from baseline 2 to baseline 3 is not yet really achieved. For the next year, we are planning similar workload for this authorization. Concerning the cab radio, we have received a lot of notifications and applications for the replacement for the protection against interference. There were in total 14 notifications and 7 authorization requests, and we have already issued for them 3 decisions. For this specific, having in mind the different programs that are at the level of the member state for the replacement of the cab radio, we are assuming that we will receive more applications in short and medium term. As positive trends, because we have now the experience in June 2019, I think that it was important from October 2020 to have the opportunity to have all the member states have been transposed. Thus we are now in the full application of the 4th railway package, meaning that we could now really see all the benefit, but also the weakness of this process for vehicle authorization. We see step by step better understanding of the legal framework and also an increase of the quality of the application. We have established a good collaboration with some NSAs via the mechanism of the pool of experts. This is important for us first to be able to resource all the applications that we receive, but it is also an essential part to ensure that all the authorities involved in this vehicle authorization process are working in an harmonized way and in a coherent way. In addition to this mechanism of the pool of experts that we have established with the NSAs, we have now in place a framework contract with external companies, which will also be able to support us in our assessment work. This means now that we have different channels, different possibilities with all the staff of the agency. Thus we have more than 50 staff of the agency being able to be and to take part of VA application. We have the NSA and we have now also this external company. And finally, we know that there are some questions, some weakness, some clarification needed on the legal framework, and we have established a mechanism via the clarification note, which give in advance how the agency will take this decision. It's very important for us to be able to be fully transparent with the NSA, to give with the applicant, to give the applicant our expectations in terms of application, but this also allows us internally to have a coherence between all the decisions that we are taking. Now, it's clear that we will all together face some challenges in the future. This is the first one, if we relate it to the quality and the maturity of the application file. What we see is that we are still facing a quite huge proportion of application where there are evidence missings, forcing us to put the application on hold. This it means that for this it's difficult. We are with the agreement of the applicant, we need to stop the clock to give them more time to provide the evidence. We see also that in the application, there are sometimes difficulties for the applicants to respect the agreed milestone to closing out issues. Related to the maturity of the product that we have to assess and for which we need to give the authorizations, we see that for this product there are still too many non-conformities, forcing the agency and the concerned NSA to raise restriction to have to define conditions for use. And this is really, I will say, a point on which we should all pay attention, because this should not be the purpose of the authorization for placing on the market. Concerning the restriction and the condition for use, we also see that there are quite a lot of incoherencies and inconsistencies between the restriction and the condition for use that we can find in the conformity assessment reports, in the certificate, in the declaration. And this forces also the assessment team of the agency to go in a lot of details when assessing these documents to be able to reflect in the authorization this restriction and condition for use. At the level of the legal framework and the rules, as I mentioned before, there will be certainly need to correct and to clarify some aspects in the legal framework. We are still facing, despite the work performed by the colleagues in the cleaning up of the rules, too many hidden national requirements. And we are also facing the problem that there is this mechanism in the directive of the cross-border agreements, allowing for this cross-border station to decrease the involvement of a concerned NSA, but these cross-border agreements are not yet enough in place, meaning that we cannot benefit from this agreement. Same for the ESC. This mechanism, when the ESC, RSC will be available, published, should facilitate all the tests, but we see that they are not yet enough available, the publication is not yet done, that the steps to be able to perform the test are not always well defined, and this is also an item on which we should all work together to improve the efficiency of the process. One main challenge that we will face is for sure the ETCS retrofitting program and the conformity to type that we have to do for this. As I mentioned before, we are now able to deliver the conformity to type in 5 working days. This is still too much. It is not in line with the expectation of the sector. We have developed and we have improved our internal process to be able to deliver quicker. We have also developed and automated a tool for this. Now what is also certain for this is that we need to be able to go quick in the conformity to type. We need to have a very good and very mature application file. To give you some figure on the application file for conformity to type, at this stage, we have still for 50% of the application file issues which are raised. And from these issues, in total for now 15% of the application file, we have type 4 issues. And finally, I will say we will need to work on the 15.1c change, because what we see when we publish them is that sometimes the decisions that has been taken by the applicant should not lead to this 15.1c and should lead to authorization. I will give the floor now to Christian for the follow-up.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I will now present you a summary of the main items that have been discussed yesterday during the workshop, the 3 sections of the workshop 2, about existing challenges for ERTMS retrofitting and installation. The first point that have been discussed is the scope of the authorization process for an ERTMS retrofit. So for this point, it has been clarified that the object of the evaluation by an authorizing entity are the change and the impact of the change, and not necessarily a complete re-authorization of all the vehicle. The point 2, need of a roadmap for TSA CCS future evolution. So it has been discussed that in order to facilitate retrofit program to get a long-term roadmap for the future evolution of the CCS TSI. We have also discussed the situation in case of change during a large retrofit program. And it was also mentioned here the the proposal for TSI 2022 recommendation about the transition period that would then help for this particular situation. ERTMS product standardization. This includes the question that users of the onboard ETCS may have about the level of compliance required to cover all their needs. To this, it was replied that on one hand, it was necessary to move towards a complete and total level of compliance with the interoperability specification for suppliers, and on the other hand, for customers and users to request only the harmonized function and to avoid specific requirements. Access to national rules, so this is related to the difficulties in accessing national rules, but also to the situation where national rules requirement may be in contradiction with the TSI requirement. For this second point, it was explained that in such case, that the situation had arisen, the agency as authorizing entity and in cooperation with the National Safety Authority concerned has been able to demonstrate a kind of flexibility and is always open to discussion with the applicant. Compatibility test, as said, it is about ETCS system compatibility checks and radio system compatibility checks. On one hand, it has been recognized that it is a good evolution, a good improvement that the major part of these checks are now publicly available. On the other hand, there is no harmonization on the content and on the level of details, and maybe in the future it will be good to work to maybe reduce or even remove this kind of checks. Responsibilities between actors. Yes, it is the fact that it is the applicant which is responsible to provide the correct documentation, whatever the kind of contractual agreement between the different suppliers, being, for example, conformity assessment bodies or manufacturers. Establishing contact with authorities. Yes, there are different possibilities. For example, pre-engagement is a good tool. It is a good tool when it is well used. I mean that in that case, the file has to be prepared, and it depends mainly on the quality of the documentation which is prepared for pre-engagement. Vehicle documentation configuration management. Here, for this point, it was highlighted the importance of keeping vehicle documentation up to date and the need to define proper configuration management process for future retrofit with new CCS equipment. Last but not least, conformity to type. So it was explained that in some cases, retrofit program includes per default a period of 1 month for the conformity to type activity for a single vehicle, but as explained just before, when acting as an authorizing entity, the average is 4 or 5 days. And if properly organized and shared in advance with applicant, this could be reduced to 1 day or in the same day even. Thank you for your attention.
So many thanks, Christian and Thierry. And just to mention that, of course, Christian is one of our assessors who is doing many of the assessments, which are then put forward to my decision. And we are seeing in real time what is coming, and we can give you the appropriate feedback. Now, time for question and answers. And first of all, I would like to ask the audience if there is any question to the contents of the package, to the requirements, and also perhaps to the return of experience. Yes, Enno, please. Enno Wiebe from CER.
Thank you, Josef. As CER, of course, I cannot resist when I see conformity to type and when we talk about ETCS to ask a question. We are slightly concerned about this. We see, when we talk about accelerated or boosted ERTMS deployment, we of course see a wave of applications coming in particular for conformity to type. We heard already from Thierry some mitigation measures, how this is going to be improved, and I think, or we think, that there is homework to be done on both sides. So it was mentioned for us as the applicants to improve the quality of the applications. This is what we are working on, together with the agency support of the list of frequently made errors. This is what we have currently discussed at the level of the network of representative bodies. But Joseph, perhaps a bit of teasing question to you. Are you convinced that you are properly prepared for this tsunami of applications coming in? If so, we would be happy. But what are perhaps the mitigation measures on your side that we can really have this boosted, this accelerated ERTMS rollout? And now it's a bit provocative, not the agency to become the bottleneck then with these authorization processes. What are the measures taken on your side?
Well, first of all, I need to say that we are possibly not as much concerned as the sector declares to be. So, first of all, as you have seen from the figures, as ERA we have now taken 2,661 decisions on conformity to type. Bear in mind that one decision is for a range of vehicle. The largest one was 250. Secondly, we should not forget that there is an important purpose behind vehicle authorization. And it is not just the legal requirement, which is stated in the Interoperability Directive and in the Railway Safety Directive, that every vehicle that is operated needs to be authorized. It's about safety, and it's also about the value of type authorization, because the conformity of type is a consequence of the strong emphasis on type, variant, and version that is in the Force Railway Package. We just want to avoid that we have the boiling the frog problem. So you change one vehicle a little here, and then you change on the next one a little there, and after 5 changes, you don't recognize any longer that the vehicle belongs to a certain category. If we don't look seriously into the conformity, we devalue the type authorization. Having said that, we clearly have some potential for improvement. First, you mentioned it, quality of application files. And unfortunately, one of the frequent errors is that the vehicle number is not correct. So how can we authorize something if it is not even correctly identified? It's like a surgeon who cuts the right leg if we should operate on the left leg. So this is fundamental. Configuration management is fundamental. On the overall principle, we had discussions with the sector already that, of course, we could give more responsibility to the sector, to the applicants, to make sure that compliant vehicles are put on the market. But that requires, in my view, 2 preconditions. The precondition number 1 is that those entities are pre-qualified, because we cannot let anyone decide that the vehicle is safe. And secondly, you need to be supervised. We have ECMs. ECMs are doing a much simpler task than a change to a vehicle. ECMs need to be certified, and ECMs need to be supervised. Now, if we allow organizations to do changes, to do safety-relevant changes, it is the minimum that these organizations are also at least pre-qualified and that these are supervised. Under these 2 conditions, we could discuss for certain organizations to give them the authority. But we all the sector, the applicants and the agency, we carry a responsibility. We carry a responsibility for safety. And for me, it's not the right argument to say, because the agency doesn't have enough people and doesn't have enough capacity, we close our eyes, and then if we have an accident, we will ask the question, who is responsible and who has caused the death of so many people? So it's a serious issue, and we are looking seriously into that. Yes, Carol.
Good afternoon, Carol Kuhn from the Association of European Rail Rolling Stock Lessors. As you know, we are big investors in ERTMS, and we have identified new risks caused by ERTMS developments experienced by asset management, like unplanned downtime due to ERTMS works, decrease of utilization, reduced area of use due to new unachievable TSI, or accelerated depreciation of book values causing immediate profit loss for the owner. So why wouldn't ERA make a strong and contradictory impact assessment of the revised CCS TSI, also based on the principles of circular economy?
Well, Carol, and you know, we have discussed this in detail when I was at your workshop, and I believe Wafka has already given some, at least, framework for answering this question, because we are always torn between the need for stability, because some people or some organizations obviously have an incentive not to change, but at the same time we have also the requirement to innovate for two reasons. The one is to provide the adequate functionality that is needed for modern services, including maintenance supported by digital technologies, but also to be connected to the other transport modes. So in the concept for the TSI 22, and you saw the explanations both in the Commission presentation and in Wouter's presentation, we have tried to take into account some of these aspects with the concept of modularity, with the concept of upgradability, which should make the life much easier for the leasing companies as well. You are one of the, I would say, the spearheads of the single European area, because you really want to operate interoperable vehicle, because it's for you also better business. On our side, we want to create, together with the Commission, the appropriate conditions that this can work. But we are happy to continue the dialogue with you, how we can improve the situation. Is there? Yes.
My name is Jaroslav Tyle. I'm from the Association of Rail Freight Carriers of the Czech Republic, and I would like at my message to what the lady said. As Mr. Wojcik said, that the upgrade we can finance or cover by the reduction of consumption of electricity. It's not true. So we face to increase of electricity just now due to ecological fees. So for example, for this year, it was 75% increase. Diesel, for example, it is only 40%. So then it's not possible to cover the cost of upgrades by the reduction of these costs. And now we are in competition with road transports. So then we will have a new non-tariff obstacles of trade on rail. And if we should include the new investments or upgrade investments into rates, then we are not competitive to road. So then you will have empty tracks and all cargo on roads. So then we need to save the costs. And who will finance subsidy? It is only effectively only up to 50%. So that's why we ask for stability of the current baseline. I think it will be still better, the baseline, for example, baseline 3, than the current national systems. So then that's why we ask for backward compatibility. Thank you.
Well, I understand this was more a statement than a question, and as such, we fully understand and support this statement. We have 2 questions here on Slido. One is related to derogations, and the other one is related to transition periods. And here, actually, I would like to ask you, Wouter, to give us some background, and perhaps, Thierry, you can support on derogations. So the first, we take if the TSI 2022 only regulates a 7-year transition period for new vehicles, the real benefit of this rule will fall short. Why did you take the decision this way?
So first of all, this 7-year transition period for, let's say, incompatible changes is also applicable for vehicles in operation for all, as I explained. Yeah. Because if you, for example, as I said, decommission GSMR, you will need FRMCS anyway and ETCS supporting this statement. What we do is for compatible enhancements like ATO, we do not put any mandatory requirements on existing vehicles. So if an infrastructure manager invests in ATO trackside, I know they want that all vehicles are equipped as fast as possible. But here we see more the access directive and incentive schemes. I refer again to the presentation of the Commission, that here IM or the member states has to use incentive mechanisms to motivate that ATO is equipped also on already existing vehicles that are able to cooperate. So we have to distinguish a transition regime for compatible versus incompatible enhancements.
Yeah, and also the coverage in the TSI via the vehicle authorization and other means such as track access charges. And what about the derogations also related to the partial fulfillment? I see that the question has now moved to the second place. So how can you explain that not all new vehicles are equipped with CTCS? How do you manage derogations, non-application of TSI granted by member states?
So why are today not all new vehicles equipped with ETCS? Because the TSI allows it today.
Exactly.
So we removed the rules that allow these exemptions, and they expect the new TSI that will become into force will request that all new vehicles from 1st of January 2030 that are put on the market shall have ETCS.
Okay, Thierry, you want to complement perhaps also from the experience of some recent cases in relation to extension of area of use and partial fulfillment?
Yes, only to mention that I think that the reply was a little bit already in the questions. For us, in a VA process, we first ask the applicant if, when they do not need or they don't implement the TCS, if they have a derogation. The derogation is a process managed at the member state level. What we are checking is that the derogation that the applicant is providing in his application file are valid, and if they are valid, we accept them, and then we issue the authorization without the TCS in this case.
Thank you, Thierry. I believe we have time for one additional question, please. Yeah, it should be on normally.
1, 2, yeah, no. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Achim Friedling from Deutsche Bahn Infrastructure Management, and there I'm in charge of the telecoms platform development. So one of the main tasks at the moment, preparation of introduction of FRMCS. And well, let's say till yesterday, to the workshop number 7 on FRMCS, I thought we have a clear roadmap for introducing FRMCS. We have a main goal which we all follow together. The first TSI where FRMCS is mentioned. We even created the wording legal anchor, which was also presented today. We know that not all specifications will be included in detail yet. That's why we have agreed upon a roadmap for a next version, as Giel also presented today, with coming into force via the ERA technical opinions. And then I understood in the TSI there is, what also was presented today, this time frame of at least 7 years of lead time of a first specification until we are allowed as infrastructure manager to decommission, line by line, let's say, GSMR. So for us as infrastructure managers and operators of such a network, we have proposed ourselves that we need a dual mode implementation. On one hand on the trains, for them to commute everywhere on all lines with GSMR or FRMCS, but also on the lines to enable the train operators, what we have seen today, to make use of the benefits of ATO as soon as possible. One of the main drivers for FRMCS, beside the end of life of GSMR, is the additional features, bandwidth, latency, and so on of FRMCS. So we need it as soon as possible. And now I understood what was presented here also today, that for a second official version of FRMCS, in a next coming TSI, there is no date yet. But if this not fixed date is now the key milestone to calculate the upcoming 7 years, we have no more goal when we are allowed to decommission GSMR. So 25 plus 7, 32, or even end 35, we would be allowed only to switch off GSMR, which means we have to operate for this very long stretch of time, both networks nationwide. And I think this we have to think about. This has to be optimized in some way. Because if this is the official TSI written regulation, then I fear that we will not be able to push hard for FRMCS introduction anymore. For me, there's a feeling that just since yesterday evening, the floor beneath our feet has been pulled away. I'm sorry, but that's my feeling at the moment.
Many thanks for your question. Giel, perhaps supported by Wouter, do you want to comment?
What we have discussed yesterday also in the workshops is indeed that there is a kind of discrepancy between the expectations from railways about the planning and the timing, and indeed the time is coming at a certain moment that the support of GSMR will be at risk. But also we need, before we can publish any extended specification of FRMCS, we need the requirements and we need the specifications. And of course, what they also try to explain is that we need some test and validation activities. So the current framework and the current planning, which is not a very strong planning, but let's say an expected planning, is that we would like to have all requirements for FRMCS, at least for onboard, but also for trackside, by 2025. Maybe it can be done earlier, maybe there's a slight delay, we don't know yet. The problem is, and I fully understand the situation, and that's not only in Germany, but in many other countries, that you only can start make plans when you are sure that the specifications and the products will be available. And that's indeed not clear yet. So we fully understand the situation. And the 7 years, what has been said this morning also, is in fact just a kind of fallback scenario, because it would be extremely helpful when at member state level there is already, and that can start tomorrow, a discussion between the concerned IMs and RUs on the migration plan itself. And what I hope that will happen in the coming years is that the full set of specifications, in particular for onboard, can be published either by technical opinions, what I just said, or by a TSI. And then you can start really planning things. But we fully understand the migration topic, of course.
Well, many thanks, Giel. And just to add from my side, as I mentioned before, we are now in the period of public consultation. So nothing is cast in stone yet. The purpose of this conference and this forum today is also to get feedback from you. We encourage you, of course, also to give us that feedback in writing via the normal consultation mechanism. In turn, we will produce the final recommendation, but this still will have to be processed and then debated between the Commission and the Member States, and we will then see what will finally be in the TSI that will be voted in the risk in November.
Yeah, the messages must be clearly, we need some anchor milestones. One is the end of life GSMR, till today, still communicated more or less officially 35. And the other one, first TSI 22. So this is the time frame within which we can move to prepare the introduction and to introduce FRMCS. And I think we have to stick to this, otherwise we will come into a drift mode.
Thank you very much. With that, we are coming to the end of the session on the TSI 2022 package. I believe our panelists have deserved a strong round of applause. Many thanks, Hélène, Wouter, Juan, Giel, Christian, and Thierry. Now, for you, the next agenda item is lunch break, and please be back here for the session on EU's rail at 15:15. So, lunch break, have a good lunch, have good networking, and see you after the break. So.